All right, so this tutorial, I want to go over trapping, color trapping in Illustrator. So trapping is the compensation for misregistration on an offset web press printing. That's just one of the basic definitions. Um, the trick is to identify what needs to get trapped and what doesn't. So I decided to create these little color samples here for demonstration so you can see what's going on here. So for this particular color, it has all these CMYK values, and this is this particular color breakdown and so on and so forth. And this one here is for reflex blue and 021 orange Pantone colors. Now, the reason why I decided to do these samples is in the CMYK form, if one of the values are shared across the board, then this object here does not need to get trapped, because any kind of gaps within the press, it will cover it by the 25% yellow, or even if I had this one here set to even 55% yellow of this color. So just change that color value to 55% yellow. It doesn't matter, but the yellow percentage, even if it's 2 or 3%, will be more than enough to compensate for that gap. So these two objects do not need to get trapped. On this sample here, since I have a same value color as the original at 100, 0, 25, and 10, whereas this one here that only has 100% magenta applied to it, since this one does not share any magenta color values, these two objects, they must be trapped. Because otherwise, this is what it'll look like on a press. And then this is just a sample. When you zoom in on it, I just did a divide feature, but it'll literally create like a little color gap in between in case there's any kind of movement when the paper travels through the printing process. It can create some kind of a gap. Now, this gap might not be as visible as the way you see it here. I just did it for sample purposes. This should technically be in this fashion that way. So just to give you guys the idea of what's going on, I don't want to go into too much details about this, but just know that trapping is the process that we use for compensation on a given press. Now, when you're doing Pantone colors, obviously, no matter what the Pantone color is, since they are their own unique colors, they must be trapped. Even if I have one of these CMYK values overlapping all of these down here, all this has to be trapped together. Now you do the trap settings. Let's get rid of these. I don't need that anymore. I'll hang on to these two for now. You can enlarge it if I like. Now, to perform the trap, you use the Pathfinder palette. Repo class that Dennis teaches goes into much details about how to use this feature in other programs as well. But for now, we're just going to do it this method. So to trap these two objects, you want to use the Pathfinder palette, go into the drop-down list and select Trap. Now you'll have this little dialog box here. The thickness is a 0.25, which is the default setting. Leave this here as default. The tint reduction setting by default is at 40%. You may have to communicate with the printing company and find out what of these settings works best for their printing press. So I hit OK to apply. Now when I zoom in where these objects overlap, you can see that it created my choke. A choke is when a darker color chokes into a lighter color, and a spread is when a lighter color spreads into the darker color. So this is considered a choke. So it generated this little part right here. So now this little tint at 40% of the color creates my trap for printing. And that's it. That's all you really need to do. Now there's a couple of different ways of going about this. Let's say if I have a text over here, and the text is colored in black, which this actually goes along with your assignments of your 2 Pantone colors plus black. If I have my text on top, I have to convert my text to outlines by going to the Type menu, Create Outlines, then select the whole thing, and then apply my trap feature by going to the Pathfinder, Trap, and hit 25%. It's OK. Now notice that when I zoom in on this, the darker color chokes in, lighter color creates the spread, and now this is considered my trap object. So before, after the effect, so this is technically considered trapped. It does, again, you can do the same thing with a stroke. Now the stroke, what it does, there's a couple of different ways of doing it. So let's say that I draw a line and I do my stroke, and I want my stroke to be the Pantone orange, for example. So there's my 021 orange. I'm going to thicken up my stroke. So I'll say 6 points. Or I can use my width tool, and I thicken up the stroke on one end like this. And let's say that this is the effect that I'm going for. Okay. So what I need to do here, and I need to convert that stroke. There's two different ways of doing it. I'm going to show you the easiest way. I need to take that stroke and convert that to an outline stroke by going to outline stroke on the paths, objects path, outline stroke. And then I can select all the elements that needs to get part of the trap, and back to the Pathfinder trap and create. And notice that when I zoom in on that, I can view my results for my trap of all the colors. So it creates all these, takes it all into consideration. It's an automatic process. I shouldn't necessarily need to do that right there, but it's still the same tint of that color. It will not create any issues when it overlaps. So you should be fine. Okay? So that's the easy way of doing it. The harder way of doing it is you have to convert that into a knockout. So I just edit, undo, and backed up until before I converted that into an outline path. So I take my path, my original stroke here, I copy it, edit, copy. So now it's saved in my clipboard. Then I change the original color to white, generating a knockout. Then I go to object, edit, paste in front, and enlarge that stroke by 0.25 again. So I have to, let's say if it was a 32 point stroke, for example. So then I put a 32 point, now let's make it 33 points. Because it was 0.8 something. So then inside my windows, I go to my appearances, I believe, or it could be attributes. It goes into attributes, into the attributes. And I tell that stroke to overprint. What that means is that it's going to create a tint and it's going to overprint on top of an actual color. That's why the stroke behind it, I set it to white, because it does not overprint against a knockout, against a white color background. But to view your results, I need to zoom in here, zoom into the corner, go to the view menu, and this time select overprint preview. Now notice that wherever I selected that stroke, that now part right there, that because I made that stroke a little larger than the original and set it to overprint stroke, notice that it creates this little tint or transparency effect, if you will. That creates my trap. So there's a couple of little ways of doing that. So I can go back to fit in window and go back to my outline view mode and then preview mode to view my results. Now, a lot of clients that I've had, and I've seen this happen a lot, is they take their fills and they set their fills to overprint. And then they sent these files to me, and I do a direct to print process, which we don't burn plates. And then sometimes when we print these files, then the text becomes transparent by going to view, overprint preview. Now you can see that the text looks a little weird. See, it creates a little transparency effect. You see this haziness right here? You see the two differences in the colors? It's a little hard to tell. Can you see that? And the text will print like that. It looks like a transparency. There's a different color settings in that block. So you should not set your text to overprint fill. See, there's the difference between the two. If I set it to overprint fill, it creates a tint. So don't do that. Back to outline view mode, back to preview mode. And that's it. That's trapping in a nutshell, guys.